Oops, trying to hit the music. And the music is not playing. All right, forget the music. Dawn, darn it.
Dun, 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 dun. I don't know how the music goes. I am totally making this up.
I'm having a hard time getting this slide down too. I'm sorry. Oh my God, what is going on? Hi, we are live. This is Story Strategy, and this is Nancy and Dawn.
And
having a hard time. There we go with the technology today.
We had that all set up. I don't know why it didn't work because we had it together today.
Why? Because I will admit I made the music slide fairly last minute and I didn't test it. So the music is not actually on it, I guess.
But I provided.
You did sing a little bit, which was nice. And then I couldn't get this because I had two slides up. I would take one down and it would look like it was still there. And not see. So that's the kind of day it's been a little bit.
And we're here.
But we are
here. Going to be good.
Yeah, we're going to talk about plot today. We're doing our back to basics stuff. So I think it's actually going to be a good discussion. But first, I have two funny stories. So I don't know, would you rather hear about the dog or would you rather hear about my 11-year-old learning to put in contact lenses at the eye doctor?
Oh, let's talk about the 11-year-old, even though that's probably going to make I'm probably going to have to blink a lot involved in this.
Well, so I've been wearing contacts since I was 8. And normally I would not think that was a great idea. The reason I got them so young, it was twofold. One, I had a horrific prescription. I still do. And so my glasses were very thick, and that was the 80s. So they did have like the high index glass, but they were still really heavy and they were denting my nose. And I was not the most secure of kids, so I hated them. But I was a ballet dancer, and so I couldn't wear them on stage, and I was dangerous because my vision is so poor. So my mom was like, well, I guess let's try this. So I have worn contacts for a really long time. And because I got them so young, I tend to think that it's not a big deal. And so I have an 11-year-old who plays soccer and refuses to wear his glasses when he plays. And his vision is not nearly like mine is, but I think bad enough that it would be better if he could see while he plays soccer. So we were like, all right, let's try this. So I took him today. The contacts are in and he had his lesson. And I forgot how hard it is to touch your eye and put them in when you're not used to it. And I was like, every morning I just, and at night I take them out. I don't think about it. But it was so I wanted to grab him and just put them in for him. It was so frustrating. LASIK is not an option for me, Julie. No, mine are literally inoperable, horrible. I am legally blind. I don't think I'm actually legally blind, but I cannot safely walk outside my house without some kind of vision correction. I will get the cataract surgery where they replace the whole lens. They do that now for people like me who can't have LASIK because my correction is so significant that my cornea is not thick enough for them to shave off the part they'd have to shave off. Anyway, so it was fun. He had a hard time.
So much of this is making my eyes hurt right now. They've been watering all day because the wind is blowing 100 miles an hour here. But oh man, no. I've never done contacts and I didn't need glasses until this year.
And they're probably just reading glasses.
Yeah, they're just reading glasses. But it's getting worse. Technically they told me that I could go straight from never wearing glasses to progressives, which sound really cool, then they're not.
No, those are the ones where you look up and look down. Yeah.
Yeah. So right now I just make do with reading glasses. You probably don't want me driving a whole lot at night in areas I don't know because I can't read street signs. I didn't realize that the where the headlights spread at night and it looks like a star coming at you. Yeah. I didn't realize that didn't happen to everybody. I thought that was just what happened to light at night.
Oh, that's just my normal.
And I've been told
I'm not the safest night driver either.
Yeah. I will tell you though, my daughter who's in college now, when she first got glasses, I think she was in 7th grade. I felt totally Mother of the Year when we went and picked up the glasses and we went to Target and she was literally walking around going, is this how you see things all the time? And I was like, she looked up at the little signs that like tell you where things are on that have like the aisles and everything. And she's like, oh, there's actually like words up there and stuff. And I was like, yes, I will take that Mother of the Year trophy now for putting off your eye exam for, 3 or 4 months when you first started telling me you couldn't see the board. So,
oh, well.
Laura wants to hear the dog story too.
Well, now we've gone through all of this. The dog story is not very exciting. He's just not that smart. And so I got home after the eye appointment to find the gate standing open for the backyard, and my older son was home, so the dog was outside. And I was like, the dog's going to be gone. Like, we're going to gird our loins for this one because the dog is gone. I was sure of it. And so I went in the backyard and called his name, absolutely prepared for it to be silent because I figured that silly dog was out wandering the neighborhood somewhere and I'd never see him again. And he is beautiful. And so I don't know, we've had some things stolen off our porch here. And so I know there are people in this neighborhood who might steal my dog. And so I was like, we will probably never see him again. He was sitting in the backyard and was like, oh, hey. I'm like, okay, the gate. Okay, never mind.
He knows where the food is.
Yeah, he's like, if I go through that gate, you'll never feed me again. So no, I'm staying here.
What's weird about that is we were talking about this before we started. We had the exact same thing happen at our house yesterday. We had some workers here who left the side gate open, and our dog went in and out of the backyard several times. Even we live across the street from the school, went out and barked at all the kids when school got out because that's her like daily routine. Yes. Never left the yard until about 7:00 last night. One of my neighbors texted me, and she's so sweet because she's like, hey, how are you doing? I hope everything's going well. Oh, by the way, your gate's open. So this is how things are. But it's nice to have dogs that don't run. All the other dogs I've had in my life, you open the door and it was like, see ya, so. Like,
what do you think is out there that's better than getting fed 3 meals a day and having a warm, dry place to sleep?
Yeah,
I guess they don't think is the key here. I don't know.
Okay, anyway. So we're plotting today. We're talking about plot.
Let's talk about plot.
Let me put my ear back in.
You got so excited about plot.
I got so excited that I lost my ear. Because you get into character, I get into plot. And so
plot makes me kind of like, I know I need one. And I realize that I will have to plan it in some way, but it kind of like I've been trying to write that outline, and that's hard.
It is. And I don't want to give the impression that when I write, I sit down and plot out every single thing. I don't want to be misleading because I was an absolute pantser.
So, you know what's funny? So when I first started approaching writing, I read every plotting book known to man and thought to myself, this is awesome. Like, all it is a system. All I need is to follow these directions and I will have a book. And for some reason, I cannot follow those directions, no matter which plotting system it is. Like, I do kind of use romancing the beat, and we'll talk about that. And I kind of use beat sheets. But the whole filling in the worksheet thing that I thought was going to be the magic ticket, I hate it. It doesn't help me. And the only time that I write well is like when I'm in the midst of it. That's when the good ideas happen. I can't do it when I'm looking at the worksheet. I don't know.
Well, and that's part of why we're going to go over just some different plotting systems, but it's very important to honor your own process. It's very important to know, like you said about yourself, that these systems don't work for you, and filling out the worksheet makes your eye twitch. And so you absolutely have to do it this way.
Well, here's the hard truth. If you're just starting out, you don't know what your process is.
Right. And you have to practice.
And have to try a few of these things to figure out that they don't work for you, or that maybe they do. Lucky you.
Well, and I remember, because I was a total pantser, now I'll plot out certain beats and stuff, and we'll talk about that. But in my total pantsing days, I took a class, and it was this is the magic formula. This is how you do it. And so I went through every step of the class because I come from an education background. If you give me a lesson, I will complete your lesson. And so I did every step of the class, and I wrote out this great outline. And then I realized I felt like I'd already wrote the book.
Yeah. And then it's
And
not fun.
no. And so I took the great outline and I was like, okay, I've got this. I don't need to look at that. And I went and wrote a completely different book.
Mhm.
And then whenever I looked back at the one that I had made for the outline, I was like, oh, well, that would have been good too. These don't match in any way, except for the fact the characters have the same name.
Yeah, I have done that before. I looked at the outline, like, oh, that would have been a really good book. I should have written that.
I should have written that too. So our goal for today is just to present some different systems, present kind of what they all have in common. So that if you are like, I'm completely lost, I don't know where to start at all, well, here are some basics that you can start with. And then moving past this, and we're going to talk about conflict and stakes and that kind of thing, but we're going to kind of take each of these beats a little bit and do a show on each one. Sometime we're going to some shows we're going to combine a few to make it so that you can kind of see how you could plot things out.
Yeah, and we do need to say too that to be a successful pantser, you have to understand how to plot.
Right, you have to understand story structure.
Yeah, the idea that you're pantsing doesn't mean you're just writing willy-nilly. You're still following some kind of structure. It's just more likely to be in your head than written down somewhere.
Right. And so while we're going through this, just everybody remember, there's no right or wrong way. It's okay. That's the thing. Also, we're not connected to any of these systems that we're telling you about. So we're just presenting them. We
are connected to the class on Teachable, but that's the only, and that's just one suggestion of how you could plot a romance if you wanted to look at that. But the other ones, they're just out there.
It's just what we found as we've gone through. So, talking about, let me get my notes here. So let's talk about beat sheets for just a minute before we get into the actual specific system. So completely new person doesn't know what a beat sheet is. What are we going to tell them?
Well, I think, and I could be wrong and correct me if I am, that beat sheets come from screenwriting, that the idea is that the action has to hit certain beats at certain times in order to keep the viewer engaged. And also I think they were mostly used for, because movie and television production is so much more time focused. They were really used to make sure that the action was hitting the right beats in a certain amount of time to get that, our episode is 26 minutes long kind of thing. Like we have to have our climax in the middle. We have to have this part here. So they're useful for plotting books because you also want to keep readers engaged and hit certain action points at certain times. So the beat sheets have all those points. And then Jamie Gold's, and we'll tell you where to find those, you can enter like what you think your word count is going to be, like 80,000, and it will tell you approximately what page or between a range of pages that those beats should occur.
Yes. So it was originally made for screenwriting. So that's why people like to adjust them for novel writing. But you will see this where people will say, oh, well, your inciting incident happens at 10%. You don't have to take, well, my book is 50,403 words. So it has to happen at exactly whatever
4,500.
Right. Yes. It's not that exact of a science when you're in writing. Jamie Gold has awesome beat sheets for all sorts of different plotting systems. She has tons of examples.
You can download them and feed them into Scrivener if you use Scrivener.
And so she is Jamie with an I, Jami, and then Gold like the color. And it's on her website, and she's amazing.
Yes, they are amazing. Yes. So I do use her romance beat sheet. And the reason why I find that one helpful is because it's specifically built around romance. And then I've actually modified it a little bit to have, because I usually have a dual POV. They're sometimes dueling. But that way I can write the beats for each point of view.
Yes. Yes. So, and that's the other thing about the systems that we're going to be talking about is everybody kind of Frankensteins them. That everybody that I know very few authors who strictly write by this or strictly write by that. There are some that do that, but most of the people I know, they like this part of this system, but they don't like that part. So they take this part. And so you can put it all together in your own style. So just because you really like one of the things we're going to talk about is Save the Cat, if you really like Save the Cat, but this part doesn't quite work for you, you can totally pull in a different system there.
Well, and am I wrong? The beat sheets are based on Save the Cat, aren't they? Jamie just modified them for novels.
Well, they've started, I think it's kind of become like a catch-all phrase. And so I think originally, yes, the beat sheet came from Save the Cat, because Save the Cat, which we're going to talk about right now, originally was screenwriting. It was set up, it was a system that was set up for screenwriting. If we're just, I'm going to pretend like y'all have never heard of Save the Cat. It was originally set up for screenwriting. It was written by Blake Snyder, and his thing, the reason it's called Save the Cat is because his philosophy about a character is, you need, if you're trying to show that a character is a good person, you need to show a moment of where they're being kind to something for no reason, where they can't receive anything back from that thing. And so you save the cat from the tree. Now, Jessica Brody took that and turned it into
Save the Cat writes a novel.
Save the Cat writes a novel, which is a really great system. And it's what I think most of the beat sheets you will find are based on. And it talks about that you have the opening image, and then you have your theme, and it gives you a pattern basically to follow. And the other part that's in Save the Cat Writes a Novel that's interesting is it talks about what kind of story you're writing. Are you writing a man with a problem story? Are you writing the monster in the house story? My favorite is they call it a why done it instead of who done it.
Is that
because
like psychological, or what's?
It's still a mystery, but it's still because what you really want to know is why they did it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yes, you want to know who did it, but you want to know, you're like, oh, the butler did it because these people have been terrible to him for 40 years or whatever. So you really want to know the why they did it.
Yes. All right. So those are beat sheets. And I mean, when you say beat sheet, I guess I would want to know what does that look like? So it is physically like an Excel spreadsheet, basically, that you fill in. And so you can save it and then reuse it every time you're going to write something new.
Well, and a lot of times the idea of all of these systems is so you know where you're going. So if you're looking at a system like Save the Cat, and so it has, it starts off with the opening image, and then it has your theme, and then it has a setup, and then it has a catalyst, which is what draws your character into the story. And then it goes on and on until you get to the final image. And so if I am writing and I get to the fun and games portion, and I write my fun and games portion, and then I'm like, okay, I don't know where I'm supposed to be going from here. If you're following one of the beat sheets, you would look down and be like, oh, well, this is the midpoint, which we're going to talk about midpoints a lot, but this is the midpoint. This is where everything changes. So it gives you an idea of where to head with your plot and with your story.
Right.
Which can be kind of two different things sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I guess. Why do you say that?
They overlap.
Okay.
But the plot is kind of like the steps you're taking, and then the story is kind of like the carpet on top of the steps.
Yeah. Well, and as much as I say I hate plotting, I do find that I tend to end up somewhere in the middle and have to reflect back on whatever plotting I did, or if I didn't, then that's when it hits me that I should have, because that's when it's always like it's easy to make your characters meet in a romance. It's easy to build the initial, here's my initial conflict, here's my initial love scenes. It's hard to figure out how to get them from there to where like things are good, things are bad, they break up. And for me, it's not like I know all those things have to happen. What I don't know is like, do they go to the mall together, or are they having dinner at grandma's house? Like, what is happening? And so
the stairs. You just don't know what color the runner is that's going on top of the stairs. Yes.
Yes. So having put the work in up front, even just to fill out a beat sheet and have some ideas about what might be happening. And I'll literally put stupid stuff like they go to lunch at Joe's house, or, and I don't know how that's going to happen or if that's going to happen. But at least when I look back at the beat sheet, then I can be like, oh, that's right. They're going to go to lunch. Okay.
Right. And now I do this.
Right.
So, okay, so that's Save the Cat. And then the next one we were going to talk about is KM, and I think you say it Whalen.
That sounds right. I'm not 100% sure either, but I'll write it out here.
She has an amazing website, and that is, I just went brain dead. Is it helping writers become authors?
I can look real quick.
Yes.
Let's see.
That while you're looking, I'll keep talking about her system.
Helping writers become authors. Yes, sorry.
Okay, helping writers become authors. So she breaks down each part of the plotting process, and she also has, I don't have a book for her because she also has a software that's called Outlining Your Novel that breaks down all of the different parts of the novel, and it gives you a little definition of each one. And hers is more broad than Save the Cat. Hers is more like you have the inciting incident, which is what is starts off your story. It's the first hint that your character has about the story. And then you have your key event, which brings the character in to where they can't leave yet. And then it talks about pinch points, and then your midpoint, and then another pinch point, and then your final battle, and then your resolution. So it's not quite as specific as Save the Cat. And I think the important thing about the plotting systems is you've got to find something that speaks to you. And this one spoke my language. So when I was first writing and I decided that maybe completely pantsing an 80,000 word book was not the best use of my time, this was the system that I kind of latched onto because it didn't feel quite as restrictive to me. There was a lot of room between those basic points.
Right. Okay. And did you say she has software that you can download?
Yeah, she has a software program. It's called Outlining Your Novel. If you look on her website, it's one of the little side thingies. It's red. I got it off of Amazon, but it's been a while back.
Okay, cool.
So,
anyway, I'll stop surfing the web while we talk.
Well, and I'll pull up the link for that and drop it in the comments too.
Okay. Oh, actually, I've already done that, so I think we're good.
Oh, okay.
Well, actually, it's not in the comments; it's in the banners, but I can move it.
Okay.
Maybe. I can show it again. I'll figure it out later. Let's move on.
Okay. All right.
Technology. Oh.
It is just not with us today. It does not like us.
My age is showing.
Okay. James Scott Bell.
James Scott Bell. I saw him speak one time. He's fantastic. Very exciting.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, wait.
And he also...
Yeah, no, I did see him. I thought it was Donald Moss for a second. I saw him too, but...
Okay.
My bad.
I should say on Donald Moss, I guess we should have kind of included him because he's like well known in the plotting world. He's a little too up there for me as far as like, I really want to understand his system. And it's a little too... I mean, I'm sure it's wonderful, and I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it feels a little too intellectual for me.
I don't remember the specifics, and I know I heard James Scott Bell speak, but I don't. Plotting from the middle. Yeah, okay, I kind of remember that. So what is that? Plotting from the middle.
Well, he has two different kind of plotting systems. One is superstructure, which I had to show this book because I was all excited to order the superstructure book. And I thought that a book called Superstructure might be a little thicker than that.
Maybe that's why it's super.
Yeah, it's very intensely compact superstructure.
It's super.
Okay, hold on. On my end, we are frozen. Oh, there. Now we're moving. So, plotting from the middle is actually really cool, and I really got into it whenever I read that book because the middle is a really important point in your book. And because it is where everything changes. And it is either everything is great and now it's all going to hop into the handbasket and start heading south, or everything's been really, really bad and now it's going to start changing and your character goes from being reactive to everything that's really bad to being proactive and starting to take charge and change whatever they need to change. So the middle is really, really important.
That makes sense.
James Scott Bell bases his plotting in the middle on the idea of a mirror moment. And that is, according to the book, there's several movies that if you stop them in the middle, like time-wise, stop them in the middle, somewhere within a small section of that, the characters like literally look in the mirror or some kind of reflective surface and contemplate what's about to change for them.
Huh. Now I'm going to watch every movie. Like,
I know, and be like, oh, that's the mirror moment. And so his philosophy there was, if you know what that change is going to be, then you can work backwards on both sides.
Huh.
So if I know my character, thinking in terms of a thriller, if I know my character is a journalist who has been hunting down this person who is doing bad things because they're trying to get this really sensational story, and maybe they're kind of the not fabulous journalist, but I know that by the end of the book, they're going to be an amazing, and they have changed their theory, and they are willing to fight for justice and truth and that kind of thing. Then in the middle is when my journalist is going to look at himself in the mirror or a pond or something and realize, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am. I want to be, I'm this person now, and I want to be that person.
Right.
And so you can work from that change, and it helps you set up, okay, who were they before? Why were they like that before? Like when we talked about our characters, we talked about the wounds and the ghost and all that. Where is all this before coming from, and where are they headed? Right. So I'm not sure how well that would work with romance.
I don't know either. I've never tried it. But I mean, you do know what's going to happen in the middle, right? I mean, with a romance, it's usually like whatever external conflict has been going on has been removed, at least temporarily, so that the characters can be together. And then generally bad things start happening after the middle.
Right. That's when the cracks start showing up.
Yeah. There's 2 points in my plotting system. One is called right after the middle. One is called bad things happen. And the next one is called more bad things happen or something like that.
Bad things happen part clever. 2.
Yeah. And I have another plot point called the big butt.
Do you like them? You cannot lie, or
it's not that kind of butt, Dawn. Oh. It's like everything's great, but.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so those are the ones that I know about and I'm familiar with and I've tried out for myself. Now it's your turn to tell us about the snowflake method.
All right. Well, I will admit that when I first read the snowflake method, and this was what I was talking about initially when I said like, oh, plotting looked super fun. Like that makes sense to me. It is a really it looks really simple. But having written a few books now, I realized that having to do this would just feel like a lot of homework that I don't want to do. But here's how it works. And I'll give you the, let me stick the URL up here real quick. I'll put it in the comments, okay? There it is. It'll only take 8 years to actually show up. So basically what it is the idea is that you start with like this little nugget of ice or snow, I guess, if we're using a snowflake. And then if you go to this website, you'll actually see it starts with a triangle, right? And then if you have 2 triangles and you put them on top of each other, you get a 6-pointed star snowflake. And then you're going to build out a little bit on each of those triangle edges, and then you're going to have the more fancy snowflake and keep going and keep going. So the idea is that you start at a very basic idea. And so step 1 is writing like the log line, if you know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially,
I know what it is, but
if you have to say what your story is about in 1 sentence, or let's be generous and say 3 sentences, then if it's 1 sentence, it's your log line. That's basically how you would tell someone what a movie's about, 1 line. But in this case, you want to boil down your idea to like the most basic elements. So like the book that's coming out next week for me, I would say it's an enemies to lovers story, small town romantic comedy set in, I haven't thought this through. I would say 2 people who are enemies inherit a haunted mansion together. And yes, it is a small town rom-com. So I've given you a sense of how the book will go. And I've given myself an idea of, okay, this is what this is about. So then the next step is writing like a paragraph that details basically a little more about what the story is about. And then the next step is writing a whole page about each character. And he gives some specifics about what you need to know about your character. And the thing that bothers me about this, like he says, step 2, take another hour and expand your sentence to a full paragraph describing the story setup, major disasters, and ending of the novel. And then he suggests you use the 3-act structure, which a lot of people who are working on plotting don't necessarily fully understand. So I find that hard. But then he tells you need to know your character's name, 1-sentence summary of the character's storyline, the character's motivation, all the usual character stuff. And so you've already spent all this time writing all this stuff, and he'll say, spend an hour doing this, spend 2 hours doing that. And by stage 4, you're basically like writing. You might as well just go write the book, in my opinion. But anyway, so it's just kind of building layers upon layers until I think the idea is eventually you get to a first draft, like through this method. So it's less about filling in a sheet and putting it over there and then writing your book over here. It's like, this is your book growing out of this initial nugget. Yeah. That is my understanding.
Do you remember those little toys that looked like little pills, and you put them in water and then the pill part would dissolve and like it would expand and be like a dinosaur or something? That's what this makes me think of.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure this works for some people. And Laura says it seems like a waste of time. You know what? I think it would probably really help you get to know your story if you're struggling to figure out exactly. I don't know. Sometimes I do stuff like this when I get stuck. I'll just take some words and throw them somewhere else and try to explain to myself what it is that I'm writing. And I feel like that's what the point of this snowflake method is, to make sure that the writer knows what they're writing.
I agree with that. I also agree with Laura.
Okay. I just don't want for us to be here bad-mouthing anyone's system.
Yeah, no. We're saying that if that system works for you, that is absolutely great. But it's also important to know what works for you and to know that you can take that little part of, okay, I need a 1-sentence part of this, and then I need a paragraph. Oh, I got this. I can start writing. You don't have to follow every single step that's laid out for you.
Well, and I do think that I would say you don't have to do it at the beginning, but by the time you publish your book, you should be able to explain in 1 sentence what your book is about.
Yes.
I have run across lots and lots of new writers at writer conferences who will say, as we sit down to talk about their book, well, it is a really original story, so it's very hard to explain. And that's usually not a good way to sell something. So it's worth spending some time thinking about how to characterize your story. And a lot of people will say it's Mission Impossible meets Bridesmaids, to kind of give people a flair, and then they'll add something onto that to explain exactly what they mean by that. But that would be a fun book.
I was going to say, I would totally read Mission Impossible meets Bridesmaids. I'm like, yes, tell me more. Can we expand that? Let's write the paragraph.
Let's do the snowflake and we'll figure out what it's about.
Yes.
Okay. So I think we've covered the snowflake method.
Yes, we've covered it.
What do we say? We've drilled that horse into the ground, or
nailed the horse to the ground.
Yeah.
Nailed the horse. And if you don't know what we're talking about there, you need to watch our episode on idioms. I promise no horses were harmed in the making of our podcast.
Only a lot of idioms were harmed.
Yes.
So the next ones that you have are genre specific. So
yes. So
Romancing the Beat, we talk about a ton. Gwen Hayes wrote this book, and this is the one that I really do use. And I think that, I don't know where I got it. Maybe on Gwen Hayes's website that I found a Scrivener download. Does that sound right? Or do you know?
That does sound right.
Okay. I think that's what I'm actually using to outline a book right now, because I have to turn in an outline, which is terrifying to me. But I write in Scrivener. And so because you can set up Scrivener with little folders and cards and stuff, I figured if I had Romancing the Beat in there, then, and I had made a Romancing the Beat template before by myself. And so having hers is even more useful because it has an explanation of like what each little thing is supposed to be about. And it kind of keeps me on track as I'm trying to plot this silly outline, which is not going that well, but
it's going to be great.
Other story.
Outline's going to be great.
Anyway,
yes.
I think there's 21 beats-ish in her system. And if you're writing romance, they just make a ton of sense.
I'm looking to see if the beats are all listed at the beginning. I am familiar with Romancing the Beat. I'm not near as familiar with it as you are. And I'm not seeing the list. But she does have, I know she has a lot of resources on her website because I think the Scrivener thing is there. And I think there was some kind of grid that you could download that was like a printout fill-in type thing.
Oh, so, yeah. If you like that kind of thing, then that would be good.
And I just know this is very popular with our clients.
Yes. And Melanie Harlow mentioned it a couple times when we were talking to her. And who else was I talking to? I feel like Lucy Score said something about reading Romancing the Beat every time she sets out to write a new novel. So,
well, you can read it in an afternoon. I mean, it is very direct and to the point.
Yeah, so. It is a lovely book and it's very straightforward. And it was the first thing I had read after trying to go through all these plotting methods where I was like, oh, I could do that. Like that makes sense to me. And it's not a lot of work. I mean, you can put as much into it as you want to. So if you are writing romance, highly recommend that. Or an adaptation of Romancing the Beat is the course that we offer on our Teachable School, which is me basically explaining kind of how I've modified it to use for my own work. And that's based on a lecture that I've done a couple times when we used to have real life conferences and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it's very, I know we've said this, but it's very romance focused because it talks about both the hero and the heroine and how are you going to get them together and what's going to keep them together, what's going to keep them apart, and how is their relationship going to form, all of that. So if you're writing romance, it's a great tool for that.
Well, and that was why it was such a wonderful thing to discover because I'd been struggling. Every other plotting system I found talked about the antagonist and the protagonist and, I can't remember what else, but it was all very not romance specific. And so I was like, I'm not sure how to modify this for a dual point of view or, because I need two main characters and there's really not an antagonist. So how do I change? And Romancing the Beat was my answer and it served me very well. So if you are writing romance, highly recommend. And then I know I have this one, Jane Cleland, but can you tell us about that one?
So you can see that I've spent a lot of time with this one.
I have that book. I should hold it up so I look important too. Here, ha 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 ha.
Look, and we can see that here's all of Dawn's sticky notes.
I have a sticky note. Look.
Yay! I didn't have any sticky notes in Romancing the Beat. I'm sure your Romancing the Beat is much more.
I think I have that one on Kindle. I don't think I have the real book. I should get
it. So I like getting paper books of plotting and craft books because then I can sticky note them. But if you're writing mystery, suspense, thrillers, that kind of thing, Mastering Suspense, Structure, and Plot by Jane Cleland is a really great place to start. She also has on her website some blog posts and some videos like this of where she explains some things. But basically, it's not so much step by step as some of the other systems. It's got a lot more room in there to play, but it does give, the biggest takeaway I took from it was about mysteries working in twist reversals and heightened moments of danger. And so if you're stuck and you're writing, you can sit back and think, okay, and she has what she calls Jane's roadmap in there that shows you based on a certain number of pages where this page would happen, where this twist would happen, where this reversal would happen, that kind of thing. And how your subplots work into that. And based on where you're at, you think, okay, do I need a twist? And a twist is just something that turns the story slightly in a different direction. So if we're talking about the dogs with the gates being left open, the twist is that the gate was left open. That's something that doesn't normally happen. And so it just made it, slightly different. The reversal is something that turns the story completely around. And so the gates left open, and we would expect the dogs to run out, but maybe 2 more dogs came in, and I went to let my dog in, and it brought in 3 friends, and so now you've got a completely different story going on. And then the heightened moment of danger, especially if you're writing suspense, thrillers, or mysteries, is the stronger threat to the characters. That's where the antagonist, who you said you were always hearing about, that's where the antagonist starts putting more pressure on.
That makes sense. Oops. I think she went on mute there for a minute.
Okay.
Bless you.
Thank you.
I have one more that I didn't add to our list, but that is awesome. So I attended a seminar with this woman who is a thriller writer. Do you know Alexandra Sokoloff?
I do. I'm familiar with that book. Yes.
And this book, Stealing Hollywood, was I told you the Gwen Hayes book was the first time I went, aha. This was the second time, because we're all consumers of television and movies, but this it basically breaks down movie structure into blocks so that you can see, if you were writing a movie, which we are not, what exactly happens very predictably in a 2-hour movie in each block, and the way that we can parallel that in novels. So she taught this class while we were watching The Proposal with Sandra Bullock and
yes.
Ryan Reynolds. And she would stop the movie and be like, okay, so what you just saw was and then she would name the block, or she would actually do it in the opposite direction. But she'd be like, okay, the next part is going to be going to the goddess. This is where the character is having, some kind of mental dilemma, and they need some extraterrestrial assistance from God or grandma or somebody. And so they go to the goddess, which just means consulting an elder or a wise person. And the next thing you know, Sandra Bullock's off in the woods. She's talking to the crazy grandma lady. It was just
which
perfect.
is an awesome scene, by the way.
That whole movie is great.
Yes, it is absolutely great.
Anyway, so that one is also highly recommended. I use that one a lot.
Yes, I'm familiar with that one. I don't know it quite as well. Thank you, Laura, for blessing me. I appreciate that. So if we're to kind of wrap up, all of these have, everything's different, but they're not all wildly different, which is kind of what's interesting about a lot of plotting structure, is that Romancing the Beat is different than Save the Cat completely. But general story structure has the same kind of things, because we're wired to understand story in a certain way, and we expect certain things to happen. And so I came up with just a couple of the basics of things that you look for, that if you don't like any other kind of plotting system, these are kind of the basics. And these are kind of what we're going to be covering while we're going through some of the next shows. And so
I think this is really important, Dawn, that you go through these, because we do occasionally have clients who will say oh, no, I'm doing my own thing. And that's not really awesome, because while writing a very creative original story is fantastic, if you want it to be a story that makes sense to people that read stories, it has to follow it has to have a structure. It's like an animal has a skeleton. A story also has a skeleton. You don't just put a bunch of skin and fur and ears wherever you want. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's okay. Your bad taxidermy book just popped into my head. And so, and we've all read books that you get and you're like, I don't know what is going on. Mm-hmm. I don't know where. And part of that head tilt feeling comes from you're missing your standard structure. And there's also sometimes you expect certain things to happen, in the middle of something, in the middle of a book or the middle of the movie, you expect something to change. And when you get halfway through and nothing has changed, your mind kind of picks up on that sometimes. And we've all seen examples of movies and books that you're like, okay, I don't I don't know
Like, what
where
did I
we're
just
at.
watch?
Yeah.
Or why
Yeah.
am I?
What did I just, yeah. There's 2 hours of my life I'm never getting back. And
Yeah. And there are some books that follow a unique structure and pull it off, but I
yes,
would recommend you don't start there.
yes. Once your name is big name author, then you can do whatever you want within reason. But especially if you're just trying to start out, following some kind of expected path is a good way to get to your goal, basically. So, basic beats. You have to have some kind of inciting incident. Some people call it there's some people who call it like the catalyst or the call to adventure, or all of these plotting systems call it by different names. But it's basically, here's what the story is going to be about. Here's a hint that you should pay attention to of this is what we're going to be talking about here. And so you have that moment, and then a little bit, and when that happens, your character can still walk away. Your character can still be like, for example, if the character sees a strange man walking down the street who's dressed all in black and, carrying one of those little Halloween things with him, and it's in the middle of April, your character can be like, oh, well, that was weird. And then they don't think about it ever again. So that's why the next beat is important. And that's the part that makes it personal to your character and drags your character into the story. And so if man's walking down the street carrying what is that thing called? The little...
What are you talking about? Oh, like a scythe?
Like the Grim Reaper dude. Yes. Yeah, I'm making up a Halloween story.
I don't know if there's a hard K in there, like scythe or scythe, but it's SCYTHE.
Okay. So he's got the thing that Nancy just said.
That.
And so the part that would draw your character into that story, depending on what your kind of story you're writing, if you were writing a thriller, it could be that the neighbor next door who always gives your character cookies was murdered, and they found part of that instrument near there. And that's where your character, you've made it personal to your character, and your character can't just walk away really at that point.
Is that the same thing as crossing the threshold?
Yes.
Or the crossing the threshold is like an active choice that the character makes.
Right. It's when they decide they're going to be they're in the story, and usually the door closes behind them. And sometimes that's like a metaphorical door. Sometimes it's an actual door. Mm-hmm. Like you'll find in movies a lot that it's an actual moment where like they get out of a car and shut a door, or they walk off an elevator and the door closes and they can't go back.
Right.
At that point, they can't go back to who they were. So then you have stuff happens, hand waving, stuff happens. And that's when you hit your midpoint. And that's like we've already talked about, it's very important. That's where things start to change. That's where things either get really good or really bad.
Right.
Depending on where you're at. And after you go past your midpoint, again, stuff happens. And then you have the all is lost, the poor person crying alone. And this is in a romance, this is when they break up, they're not getting back together. In a thriller, this is when we thought we had this guy, we had him arrested, and somebody else got murdered over here. Or the moment where the person who was going to be a rock star wakes up with laryngitis on the morning of their big show. So
everything's bad.
Everything's bad. Yes. Which part of this is this the more bad things happen part of your...
I don't remember. Some of them have stupid names.
But after the all is lost moment, this is the part we're waiting for. This is the part your reader's waiting for. This is the part you're waiting for the movie. And that is your character picks himself up, and there is either a battle, or if you're writing romance, this is the grand gesture where he's chasing her down, chasing down her airplane on the runway, because that totally could happen, on
a horse.
Yeah. On a horse, yes.
Alexander Sokolov calls it storming the castle.
Yes. Yes. And it's I'm going to change my life. I'm going to get the girl. I'm going to go make my dreams come true. So whatever big battle they have to face, that's when that happens. And then you have the final image, the end. And some genres don't spend as much time in the end as others. So like in a romance, after you have the big, I love you too, we're going to be together forever. Some romances can end like on that kiss with the sun setting behind them and that kind of thing. But then us readers are like, oh no, we want the epilogue now.
Yeah.
We want marriage and
what
the
does
baby.
It look like when they're happy? Show us that.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Show us them happy. Generally in like a thriller or a mystery, there's after the big bad guy has been caught, there's usually a little tiny bit after that shows how the character has changed. It shows whatever their new life looks like, shows the bad guy being let off to prison, something like that. So those I think are the main, this will help your story type beats.
Yeah. And there's little ones that go in between, obviously, and it will depend on what you're writing. But
yeah, we will hit on those as we're going through these too.
Yep. Well, I think that's probably it for now. I don't see questions really. But we always take questions later if you have them. Mm-hmm. So next week we're going to talk about conflict.
Yes, I'm excited about that one too.
You are. Conflict was the thing that when I started, my agent would always look at the book and be like, there's not enough conflict. And I was always like, I don't understand. Like there's a problem. They solve the problem. That's the conflict.
Yeah, we're going to talk about conflict a lot. And we're going to talk about the fact that conflict and confrontation are two different things. Yes. Because that's the main confusion that you see is new writers thinking that, well, if I have to have conflict, they have to be arguing all the time.
And that's a lot of fighting. Oh, I see.
Yes. Yeah. And that is absolutely not what that's supposed to mean.
Yeah.
So that is next week.
Very good. And then we'll go through some other stuff, scene structuring, grabbing attention, inciting incidents. We've got lots coming up.
Yes.
So stay with us. Next week, we'll probably have music. I'm not going to make guarantees, but I'm going to try to.
I will guarantee that I will not sing again. I will save us all from that.
All right. Well, I hope
thank you for watching and thank you for hanging out with us.
Yes. Stay safe and healthy. Happy writing. And we'll see you next week.